You're listening to the Roundup Podcast, a podcast on reaching the college campus, developing leaders, and sending out kingdom multipliers. This podcast is created by the Southern Baptists of Texas Convention and provided through cooperative program giving.
Drew, how's it going, man?
It's going great. Glad to be here.
Yeah, hey, thanks for inviting us to Highland Baptist Church here in Waco. And
Yes, sir. Glad to have you all.
This mighty metropolis here in Texas.
It's growing.
They
call it the Jerusalem on the Brazos, but I don't know if that's real. But
where does that come from?
I don't know. It's some kind of a weird phrase, but yeah, so it's
nice,
a great place.
Man. Well, hey, man, thanks for having us here today. And man, really just wanted to talk about this transition with the SBTC Collegiate, the Roundup Network. Been leading this for the past 9 years, and now, as we're kind of going into this new year, you're going to be kind of taking the lead on that. But before we jump into this, I just would love for you to kind of riff and tell us a little bit about, man, who you are, man, what God's been doing in your life, and we'll kind of get into more of the details of that later. But would love to know. Just like, who is Drew Humphrey? Help folks know that.
Absolutely. Well, I grew up in Texas my whole life, and my dad is a pastor and always has been various churches in the state. And so grew up very close to church. I gave my life to the Lord at 9 years old at a revival, actually on Halloween. So Halloween was a little bit redeemed for me in a sense. Every year I always remember I was saved on Halloween at a revival led by John Randalls, if anybody knows that name from Texas. Yeah, legend. So, yeah, he is. And so that was, started my faith journey. I started to really, my entry into ministry was music, and they won't let a 14-year-old preach, but they'll let a 14-year-old lead worship.
Absolutely.
And so that gave me a lot of leadership opportunity early on, primarily at First Baptist Church, Allen, Texas. That's mostly where I grew up in North Dallas.
Gotcha. And
so really learned a lot about leadership, leading my peers, leading in worship. And then through that, the Lord called me into vocational ministry around the time I was a senior in high school. And that led me to Waco to basically study the Bible. They have a biblical studies degree here at Baylor. And that led me to Highland. I actually found Highland about 3 weeks into my time here as a freshman, and they needed a worship leader. I could lead worship, and so I basically just stepped in. This is before our current pastor, kind of before this current era, so we were in a transition. Actually, my whole 4 years of college was pastoral transition, kind of leadership chaos, but it was a great opportunity for me to learn the hard part of church and the hard part of ministry. Yeah. And so as a college student, I was serving in worship ministry, youth ministry, and I was really just learning about ministry in a hard time. When I graduated was when our lead pastor came, John Durham. He's been here for 11 years, 12 years now. And so that was when I basically shifted into a more settled place here at Highland. I kind of moved into a full-time role, continued in some various roles, but about 10 years ago was when I became the college pastor here at Highland, and I've been leading the college ministry since then. I met my wife along the way, Holly. She's a labor and delivery nurse here in Waco, and most importantly, we have 4 kids, all 6 years and younger. So we did the foster and adoption thing. So our 3 oldest are foster adopted, and then our youngest is a biological son. And so, the ages make no sense. They're all jammed together really close between 6 and 3 years old, and so we love our kiddos and our community here. And then, just been learning a lot about ministry, college ministry, discipleship ministry. Recently, been really growing a lot in prayer ministry. I think that's really marked us a lot. I'm sure I'll talk more about that later. Yeah. And so that's kind of who Drew is and my family in Highland and how I got connected here.
That's awesome, man. Well, I remember, I think it was, it was probably 3 or 4 years ago. I'm talking to Justin Smith.
Yes.
Who's former college pastor here at Columbus Avenue in Waco. And he's telling me, he's like, you got to talk to Drew. And Justin actually claims, I think Justin claims that you're the best college pastor in Waco. He may have said Texas, so I'll give you that credit.
He was a close friend, but I love doing ministry with Justin.
Yeah. So he's telling me, he's like, man, you got to get to know Drew. And so our paths really hadn't crossed at that point. And then we met at North American Mission Board, the Collegiate Multipliers national thing a couple of years ago, and then invited you into Roundup, into Commons, and man, just really, I think one of the things as I've grown to know you over the last couple of years is, man, God's obviously using you in a powerful way among college students here in Waco, but not just. And I think that you can see that over the last couple of years, like your influence has really blossomed beyond Waco, but is helping other ministers. And so I've been really thankful for you. Because I think when I look at the way we've built, Roundup Commons, this whole Collegiate Roundup Network.
Right.
We always wanted to get people involved that were going to be like kingdom-minded collaborators and really, love Jesus, people of high integrity and love Jesus. And so you kind of checked all those boxes and have already begun to really be a resource. And so for me, and again, we'll get into more of this as we kind of go along here, but for me, it was really kind of a no-brainer of like, as things were transitioning for me to say, hey, who's going to lead this thing into the future? In some ways, the things that you'll be doing in this role, you were kind of have already started doing. And so anyways, it was kind of a no-brainer. But man, Drew, just glad to have you on board. And really what we want to do through this, man, is we just want to tell the story about, in this transition, we've been building the network for, this has actually been going on for longer than 9 years. There's been a couple of the folks that I'll share about here in a little bit. But, as we've been building this in this transition moment, just want to remind folks that are part of this network and even folks that may eventually be, what this thing was built on and then what to really kind of expect in the future, because it's going to be very different leadership from myself to you, and I think in a really great way. And so I want to kind of uncover that because I think there is something special happening here and a foundation being built for the local church college ministry, not just in Texas, but really around the nation. And so anyways, excited to kind of jump into this.
Tell us about 2016. I know you said it was before that, but kind of that era of why was this necessary? Why did you feel like we should start this? How did it start? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So we, if you even go back further than that with the genesis of the organization that, essentially runs Roundup Network, which is Southern Baptist of Texas Convention, started in 1998. Because there are 2 state conventions in Texas, the SBTC didn't have a campus-based model to support. Right. And so it was always about how do we support the local church college ministry. And had great leaders in the early 2000s. Kevin Eckert, Lance Kroll did a great job at kind of creating some stability and foundation of like resourcing church-based leaders. And then there was kind of a day where it was just kind of there, I guess. But in 2016, I remember my very first day on the job, I met a guy named Brian Fry, who at this time was the National Collegiate Strategist for the North American Mission Board. Okay. And his big deal was, hey, if we want to reach North America, the most ripest field to reach and to mobilize as disciple makers and multipliers are college students. That's right. Yeah. And so he had this huge emphasis on that. And it was kind of funny, like even if I go back from that a little bit and think about my calling, I had restaurant business background, and I kind of fell into denominational life, that's a whole nother story. It's
a God thing.
And so I kind of fell in this college thing, but God just began to put these people around me that really showed me how the potential of reaching that demographic could do for the kingdom. And so that was when I kind of captured this vision. But what I realized is I looked out, the local church college ministries were very isolated and disconnected. And so here I was seeing a vision of like something beyond what even I could do, or I had the practical experience of doing. Right. And then I saw a bunch of disconnected, isolated local churches and college ministries. And so I knew like, okay, I don't have expertise to give, but I can get people in the same room. Yes. So that's when in 2016 in May, just like 2.5 months after I got the role, I got 5 churches on board, about 25 leaders total. We met in the Fort Worth Club and just really collaborated. Because again, I'm not an expert. Right. I'm not an expert in college ministry. But I thought, hey, they do college ministry. Yes. How about we just get them in the same room and let them share what they know? And that actually proved to be a silver bullet in, this is actually very helpful and resourceful for local churches, because not only were they building community with each other and realizing, hey, we're not in this alone, but they also were learning really great things from each other that they may not otherwise have known. Yeah. And so that's why I always say I think the silver bullet is not necessarily in a book, but it's the college pastor across the street or across town that you can learn from. So that's kind of how we got started in 2016. And that was like a real epiphany for me, because it was like, if I can just keep networking the state, getting the people in the room, I think this thing could grow and we could see more college students come to faith in Jesus, but also be made in disciples and multiplied and sent out into strategic kingdom places to make a difference. So that was kind of the genesis.
Was there a moment where you noticed it was really taking off? Maybe not at the beginning, but a few years in or something. Is there a story there?
Yeah, like if you look, like even if you look at, I always kind of look at some of our big gatherings, and that's kind of a key indicator to see like, okay, how are we growing? And it's always for me more about how many churches are we kind of bringing together, and we just saw that consistent growth year after year, and it really was, it grew from, probably that first year we gathered 5 churches to now we'll gather probably. Like say a Roundup, which is our main collegiate event we'll do in May, we'll gather, I think 66 churches was the last, was the biggest one we had. Yeah. And so it's like, so we're kind of, and so that shows me that, okay, there's really something coming here. But I think one of the things, Drew, that was really key for me was that, like, as we were creating space purely for the local church college ministry, like that was like, it was almost like a breath of fresh air because there's not many things that are just specifically for local church college ministry. You can go get some things on the internet. You can go to some even campus-based type college ministry events, which can be helpful, but it wasn't like this is purely for the local church college ministry. Because, I mean, as you know, like the dynamics of, although a campus-based model and a church-based model may be reaching the same demographic, the way that operates is completely different.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
campus permissions are different.
Yes.
All the things that you're trying to do are totally different.
Yeah, there's so many different dynamics. And so I think that's where it was really refreshing. And that's when the momentum started to build. And I think even as I look back to now to see that I think this year, I think we'll have like 4 leaders who have been college pastors who have now started and planted churches in college towns who have been a part of this. That for me has been such a, like, that's been awesome because it showed me like we weren't just trying to get students. We weren't just preaching and casting visions of just trying to get students through 4 or 5 years of college. Right. This is like a lifestyle thing. Like we realize we're not reaching students at the expense of others, but we realize this is a very strategic demographic. And if you change their life during this period, it will change their whole life.
Absolutely. It's a trajectory thing.
It is. Yeah. It's a trajectory thing. So when I see like guys like, Mitchell Johnson, Chris Cummings, Justin Smith, Zach Cunningham, Chris Millard, these guys that are going out and, planting churches to do, it's like, man, like, okay, that's, I feels like, and I'm not taking credit for, I don't take credit for that.
That was the dream when it started.
But it was a dream of like that would happen. And so, and there's obviously other environments that those guys have been in that have helped with that. But it's like, hey, that's what we love to see. It's because I believe that those are all godly men. Yes. They're going to reach students. They're going to make disciples. And I hope those churches, 100 years from now, they still exist and have planted more churches. Yeah. So it's exciting to me to think, hey, what's that going to look like in 50 years? So,
Yep. What do you think is your favorite kind of story, testimony, however you want to label it, over the last 9 years from this Roundup Network? I think it's those guys. Yeah. And there's so many more. I mean, I think about, even as so I'll say this, it's those guys. It's like, man, to see that, we wanted to plant churches to reach college students, we strengthen churches and plant churches. Yes. We've done that both. Yep. I think we've been able to resource hundreds of churches, thousands of leaders, plant those churches, and to see that, man, there can be long-term kingdom fruit from this. Like for me, that's huge testimony. But even this too, like I think about a guy like John James in Nacogdoches. Guy's just faithfully there with his wife and Melina, and they're just doing a great job. But like even Chris Millard, who's now playing in San Marcos, but like they're sending mission trips. They're sending students over there to help with the church plant. Great. There, and there's just so much like cross pollination happening. And I think that for me is like the sweetest thing I look back on is to see like people cross, even like you telling me like, hey, there's these 5 churches I'm going to do stuff with, and it's through connections that you've made through it. It's like, that's amazing, man. Like that kingdom collaboration. Yes. I think that for me just feels like,
it almost feels like a proud dad moment a little bit. You're like, this is amazing. Like people are doing stuff together, Yeah. Like it's
great.
like, I'm not, and it's weird to say proud dad moment, but it's like, you're just like watching things happen. And it's like, this is really amazing. Like this is kingdom collaboration.
Yes.
God making a difference. So, well, Drew, I want to transition to you. That's a little bit about where we've been, but like when you first kind of dipped your toe into, what we're doing through Roundup Network, kind of what drew you into that? What was kind of that appeal to you?
Yeah. I remember first kind of seeing your face during COVID, funny enough, on the back porch during lockdown, and you were doing an Instagram live with somebody.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you were doing that like every other day, like everybody was, but your stories would just constantly be Instagram lives. Everybody's were, during that time, just trying to keep going. And so I was like, man, I don't know what this, SBTC thing is. Roundup, had no idea, didn't know you. And so, but just kind of started to trace the threads of equipping, right? There'd be videos or blogs or whatever else. And then, like you said, we met in Atlanta at the coaching network through NAM, and then connected here in Waco as you would drive through. Sometimes we grab a couple meals together, things like that. And then really in Roundup, a couple of years ago, Roundup was my first time to go, and brought kind of my two key leaders with me as well, team members, and was so encouraged by a lot of, there was, whether it was the main stage or the breakouts, those kind of things. But we had a couple of just transformative pivot moments with the tear sheet experience. I don't know what the official term is. I just call it, tear sheet ministry basically. But, a couple of those things over the course of those 2 days where, a new vision was downloaded from the Lord on that tear sheet, and the Lord showed us we need to cut some things, we need to add some things, we need to multiply some things. And, it was really helpful and healthy. God was already doing that. We couldn't really quantify it so easily until we got there, and the Lord really united that. And then that was an accelerant for us because God was already doing things were happening in our ministry, but Roundup really did help us to, streamline it. The stream kind of got narrower and it got faster because of that, and so, and then of course got dialed in with all sorts of different, as you mentioned, connecting with people even in Louisiana or, across the state, way far away, people in very different churches, very different experiences, but became friends, helped each other, prayed for each other, and then stayed connected through various roundups or commons or events or things like that.
I'm so thankful that you did lean in on that. 'Cause it feels like, especially over the last couple of years, like, man, the Lord's really just kind of dialed you in on some specific things that, again, we're going to get into probably more here in just a minute. But I want you to talk about now, because I think this is a kind of a key difference between probably you and I. Again, I was a pit master that came in to lead college ministry.
Yes.
And you're this practitioner who's been now a college pastor for 9 years.
That's right, yeah.
Right? And so I want you to take us through just like your journey as a college, because like, by the way, like I think college ministers, like they age in dog years. So like if you've been doing this for 9 years, it's equates to like, I don't know. Jesse, are you good at math? Who's good at math over there? What's 9 times 7?
Yeah. We'll leave it. Yeah. I'm not a math guy. I do ministry.
You got it? What is it?
63. It's 63.
63. All right. So Drew's the math guy. So you're like, so you've been a college pastor for basically 63 years. That's what it feels like.
Wow.
Because I really feel like probably the average tenure of a college minister is, maybe 2 years.
Yeah, probably so.
And so you're easily probably one of the most veteran guys here in the state. So anyways, all that said, take us through like just your journey as a college pastor and how, like, as you've grown in this over the past 9 years, your view of discipleship and leading college ministry, like what that's morphed into. So,
well, I was always called, like I mentioned, to music ministry. And then when I got to Highland, they paid me to do youth ministry, as a college student. And that was every summer, so I'd literally never left once I got here. And, so when I became the college pastor, about 9 years ago or so, I had been essentially the keyboardist, of the church. I would do a little video things here or there. I might have previously done some youth ministry. But, funny enough, in college, I had been in small groups. I had been in college ministry. But I became the college pastor having never led a college small group in my life, having never, really done any of those things. And so I feel like early on what I was doing was just learning and listening, and I knew Baylor, I knew Highland, but I really did not know how to be a college pastor,
Yeah.
And so God was just really teaching me, so many things about like what to emphasize, what not to emphasize. There was a lot of keeping. We kept a lot of things. The college pastor before me, Kyle Dunn, was my college pastor. Great man of God, great Bible teacher. Had been here 16, 17 years himself. And so, it's not as if it had been one of those like every 2 years experiences here, for us. And so it was learning, okay, what do we need to keep? What do we need to change for this new season? And also I needed to learn how to lead. I needed to learn how to preach. I needed to learn how to, do all of the discipleship, multiplication stuff. And okay, well, how do we do mission trips? And it was a long time before I learned the important stuff of prayer and evangelism and what should have been the core beginning. It took me a little bit of time. And so really just like over these years, I feel like that has been, I think one of the most important things to what's happened over the last 9 years from a person level, not from what God's doing and all that, but just kind of the things that are tweakable from a man and team perspective is just having the right team members around us, having the church, the vision from the elders, like way above my head, saying like, hey, college ministry is valuable. College ministry matters. We're going to invest into this. We're going to give space to this, whether that's an announcement or that's budget, or that's, an office or, kind of facility usage or whatever else. That has always existed at Highland, and I can tell that story more, soon, but it's certainly been something that I feel like over the last 10 or 15 years, there's been even more of an emphasis of like, college students are members right now. They're not some kind of little holding tank on the side where you have like a side service for them. We need them serving in our church. We need them leading in our church. We need them in our prayer meetings. We need them in our worship gatherings, and therefore we're going to include them and consider them. So from that team perspective, obviously staff team, that was important. But then it was also like, formulating our college staff team, and getting the right people surrounding me. What am I bad at? What am I good at? Who can I surround myself with that's good at the things I'm bad at, and that just took some time. But God really, was gracious and filled the gaps, obviously, in those years where it wasn't right, and then really the biggest kind of transformative thing that happened in my life was about 3 years ago. I essentially had like a personal prayer revolution, just a conviction that I was operating from a place of my own strength in ministry, especially in my 20s. And as I turned into the 30s of my decade, it just became this sort of, deep conviction, almost a vow of like, I want prayer to be what marks me, not my own strength, my own capacity, my own creative ability or innovation, but prayer to be what marks me, and depending on the Lord in that. And that was when everything around here, college ministry wise, just started to explode, expand, multiply, and not just in numerics, but the depth. It was more of the depth that just got crazy deep. And then, we didn't change our pastor. We didn't change our, I didn't change my clothes. I didn't change our way that we do ministry. The only thing we changed was we're going to focus on prayer at every level, individually, staff, to the college student and to the campus. And once that pivot happened, everything started to go deeper and wider, and God started to bless it in a really special way. And so,
how did you, as you're running a ministry, it can feel like you're running a machine, and you're just trying to do these things, to run the program, to do it. You kind of get it, and you kind of have this moment where there's like a, not a crisis of belief, but just like a kind of an epiphany of like, hey, I think I need to dive deeper into prayer. Take us through like, what were those shifts like when you started doing that and you guys started leading at those different levels in prayer? What were the changes? Like, how did that look, that whole transition, and what began to happen?
Right. There were some of those things starting to happen in our church. Like, it's not, we went from 0 to, 100, but I would say it always is going to start in the heart of the leader, first. And, there's a great quote that says, praying pulpits beget praying pews. And I think you could sub out any word, evangelistic pulpits beget evangelistic pews or whatever. But in the sense of prayer, it had to start in the heart of the leader, so that it would trickle down into the team, into the student leaders, into the students, into the, even the gatherings and all those kind of things. And so, but I think how the lead up to it was almost a sense of like, if you think about like an airplane or a spaceship, like the dashboard, all those dials, like if you think about that, your heart as a ministry leader, and, sometimes it's functioning right. Everything's, stabilized. And then all of a sudden a little alarm starts going off. It's like, hey, something's wrong. Alert. You're not totally crashing yet, but you need to make some changes or you are going to crash. The year or two leading up to sort of my personal prayer revolution conviction was a lot of those dash lights going off. Like, hey, I don't feel right physically. I feel like emotionally, spiritually, there's some things where the dashboard lights are going off. And I would say every leader has some sort of a ceiling, some sort of a capacity. Some people it's extremely high. Like you can do a lot of ministry output. But eventually I think most of us will reach a place where our ministry, what we need in our ministry, what God's asking us to do in our ministry is way beyond our capacity, way beyond our ceiling. And so that was about 3 or 4 years ago starting to happen in my life. And all those, in my 20s with learning and growing and starting and, all that was, I think my capacity was high enough to just kind of personally do it without having to depend on God in prayer.
Yeah.
And we were successful. There were things going on. We were growing, people were being saved. Good things were happening. Ministry was happening. But we came to a point where God was like, that's been enough. Like, if you're going to do this right, if you're going to keep doing this at all, it has to be depending on me, And honestly, I remember in my 20s having these moments where I don't know if it's the voice of the Lord or just a sensing from the Lord, where multiple times where I've almost felt ashamed to hear this phrase come into my mind that was, Drew, you're already doing great things in ministry without depending on prayer, without really depending on me in the secret place. Mm-hmm. How much more could I do, meaning God, how much more could I do if you would just give me that space, if you would just emphasize and centralize the secret place of prayer. And I didn't understand the power of that, but I felt the convicting word like that. Yeah. And once that pivot shifted a few years ago, it became true. It was, it must have been the Lord who was putting that in my brain, because it was just like, we've just been doing less, less and less and less, but doing more and more prayer, centralizing that in secret ways individually and in corporate ways with the whole congregation. And then it is so true. God's like, because you've given me this, like there's just so much more that I want to do. Your capacity is so much higher, immeasurably more, as Ephesians 3 would say, than you could ever ask, think, imagine. Like that kind of stuff. I think the key to that door of Ephesians 3 is prayer, because it's depending on God. And so, I think you start to sense that dashboard of like, whoa, like something's off, and then hopefully you make the pivot and it changes things.
Drew, do you think there is, we are millennials.
Yes.
And we grew up in like hype Christianity.
Yes.
We wanted to make Christianity fun and cool again, kind of thing. And so it was really about, at least that's the way that I kind of interpreted that. And now, you're mainly ministering to a Generation Z Alpha coming here shortly.
Absolutely.
And do you feel like, I don't know, as I'm listening to you and I'm seeing the testimony of what God's doing in your life and the life of your college ministry, do you feel like this is also, there's like a little bit more at play here, and that like almost a generational shift of how the Lord is leading the next, Generation Z, the next generation college students, and how they're connecting with the Lord? Like, I don't know, what have you kind of witnessed over these 9 years? Because you started with millennials and now you're Gen Z. So talk us through some
absolutely.
of that.
I think you were hitting the nail on the head with that, Mitch, in that we are seeing the things that worked 10 years ago, 20 years ago in terms of hype go away. Yeah. And I would say COVID either amplified that or accelerated that or just illuminated that. Maybe it was going to happen either way. Yeah. But I think what happened with COVID is basically all of the hype of everything. A 20-year-old today was 16 years old during the COVID time, right? Yeah. And so when they were 16 or 15 or whatever they were, everything was stolen in terms of the hype. Their prom, their sports, even their youth group, if they were a Christian, right? So it had to become simple. It had to become real. Like, what can I do in my bedroom, just me and God praying, or just with 3 people? And that has now created, I think, a shift, or has illuminated what God was going to do anyways, to simplify in a powerful way what ministry is and what they're hungry for. For us, we have a monthly gathering. We have weekly small groups. We have a monthly gathering for our college. At that monthly gathering, we would reach, most weeks back about 3 years ago, like 2 years ago, we would reach 400 or 500 students. And that's awesome. I'm so thankful that was happening. And but it would be through, okay, yes, we're doing Bible and word and all that. And, we're going to do some worship. There's going to be an after party. It's like, there's going to be, a great treat and a great beverage and all that. Yeah. And so sometimes we were spending thousands of dollars. Sometimes we even did like, bounce houses and petting zoos, and all that kind of went all out. And it was amazing. It was what God was asking us to do, I think, at that time. But as that shift has happened, this semester, we basically cut all of that. We don't have we have spent almost $0 over the course of this semester on that event.
No more petting zoos, huh?
No more petting zoos, no more, $700 coffee, thing or whatever else, and we've seen double or sometimes even triple the attendance, because I really believe that this Gen Alpha, this moment, people are just hungry for God. That they'll tolerate and be fine with the sauce on the side and kind of the extra stuff.
Yeah.
But I think they get enough of that at campus. They're not asking us for that. They're not really even hungry for that.
Yeah.
But what they can't find is that deep place of just simple, authentic worship. I mean, truly, it's like we're doing less even with our lights, with our sound, with our teams. It's less produced. It's less put together, but it's deeper, and there are more of them coming, and they're hungrier for God in that way. And that's not just true at Highland. Like I'm hearing people from all over the state say, like, "Hey, yeah, we're doing that too, and we're seeing that too," and across the nation. Even in England and connections that I have across over there, it's like, there's just something in this generation that's simplified and just they want authentic more than hype. And I'm thankful for that. It's a lot easier to minister in that setting if we don't try to buck against that.
I know. As I just kind of look back, even from the 90s into early 2000s, and now we're at 2024. It's like almost, I feel like as millennials, we at the tail end of our generation, it was like Christianity was trying to keep up with culture.
Yeah.
And it feels like now what young people are wanting is a Christianity distinct from culture.
Right.
Like it's separate, it's holy, it's not like what I'm experiencing here. So such an interesting, I think, transition. And I feel like, and I think that's, one of the things I've seen in you, Drew, and just like your leadership, that you feel like you're kind of on the front end, the front of kind of leading in this, I say it's a new way, but it's an ancient way.
Right, exactly.
That's very simple. It's back to the basics. And so, that's why I've been just really intrigued by you and just really what God's been doing. And
well, I'll say there's a leadership principle called the leadership of the wave, or the wave principle. I've heard it said different ways, but it's, if you think about like the waves coming into a beach, right? If I'm on a paddleboard or if I'm on a surfboard, right? It's like I see the wave, I have to start doing a little work, but then once I actually catch that wave, I do nothing, right? And I think ministry is a lot like that, where as ministers, we do have to be aware and see a wave coming, right? You have to be able to see, and then you have to do a little work to kind of get that going. And that's what I would describe 2 or 3 years ago we were doing. It was work. We would have a prayer meeting and 2 people would show up. Sometimes 0, but there was a sense of, we got to paddle into this wave because we sense something's coming. And then now it's like, we don't have to try. We're on the wave, and it takes work. I'm not saying it's 0 work, but it's so much easier. But that sense of that wave principle, I think, is so important to just kind of, again, and that's why the individual heart of the leader has to be a prayer warrior, has to be dedicated to prayer, because they have to be listening. To see the wave, it takes prayer and listening and word and time in the secret place for God to give you that awareness to hear his voice. And so, I think we've seen that happening at Highland, and I'm just trying to keep my ear to the ground to, watch the next wave and see what God's asking us to do. Yeah.
Going back just a little bit here, as I think about what God's doing in your life, the life of Highland and college ministry and in my life, I think over probably the last year, maybe year and a half, I'd kind of sensed that I enjoyed doing, and honestly, I felt like I could lead that Roundup Network for the rest of my life.
Right.
I loved it. It was fun. It's hard work, but it's fun work. I love the people I get to do it with, college pastors like yourself, like my man Jesse over here, Jen, not leaving you out. It's just fun. Like, these are people I enjoy being around, and we get to do ministry together in a kind of a different way for me. But I did sense like that, sometimes it's funny, like how the Lord will kind of slow drip, like change is coming in your heart, but it's like veiled, and you're like, I don't really know what to do with this. And it just really felt that way. And it also felt like as I was working, there's just this sense of like, I think my time doing this is coming to an end, but there's not a ton of clarity. It's just almost like the Lord was, preparing my heart.
Absolutely.
And so, and what's kind of interesting is when I get to this point where, the leadership at the SBTC comes to me and asks me about taking on a job at our senior level. It was, then it was like, okay, well, that this kind of makes sense because I felt like for a while the Lord, and actually at first I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. But like the more that, I was talking to mentors and talking to my wife, and they were just like, hey, you don't need to ignore this.
Right.
You don't write this off immediately. You need to think, consider, pray on that. And because now, so the role that I'm transitioning into is I'm overseeing communications and people networks, which Roundup Network's one of them. So there's still a connection there, but it was just kind of a weird moment for me because there's this thing that we've kind of been building for 9 years. It's almost become like a child. Yep. But knowing that this thing is not about me, it's not about any of us. It's really about, hey, what are we doing to resource local churches to help them reach, develop, and send college students?
Absolutely.
And so anyways, as I was kind of like wading through that, I was also like really a little bit alarmed at first because I was like, I don't know, where do we go with this? Like, who do we hand this thing off to? Because I was thinking, most of our major, significant influencers in it, they're planting churches or they've gone on. And so it was like sitting there kind of wondering. Mm-hmm. And at the time, though we knew each other, your church wasn't affiliated with the organization. And so there was just a number of things, but it was so really cool. And I want to tap into this.
Absolutely, yeah.
But, I thought to myself in the back of my mind, I remember thinking like, man, I'd love for Drew to do this. Mm-hmm. But there's so many hoops to jump through, because this is a big role. You're a college pastor of essentially a mega church. You got 2,000 college students that are coming, 1,000 in small groups.
Right.
And there's a number of other things.
Of course.
You've also got 4 kids. You got enough to do. And so, but there's all kinds of those things. But I kept thinking like, man, that would be. I really think Drew might be that. To bring that next phase into what we're doing. Roundup 2.0 is what I called it. And so I remember that first call with you. Man, you were just, obviously the Lord was doing things in your life.
Yes, yeah.
Because you had he had prepared you for that call.
Yep.
But tell me a little bit, like, that was kind of what was going on in my heart as I was cinching the transition. I love what I was doing, but it really felt like this is bigger than me. Yeah. It's not about me. And so I want to make sure that as it goes into the future, it goes into the right hands and it's led well. Because I'd love, for Roundup Network to be a thing 50 years from now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so tell us about like what's stirring in you during this time.
Oh, well, it was, going back many months when you first called me that day, you basically just texted me and said, hey, can we hop on a call? I had no idea that you were, leaving the job. I knew you had a new job, but I knew that the goal was to kind of try to do both or figure it out. So I was like, okay, cool. Just hop on a call and see what's up with Mitch. When that call happened, it was a Wednesday. I want to tell just a brief story about what happened 3 days before and then what happened just a few hours later. Yeah. 3 days before that call, again, totally no idea what was going on. I was leading worship on the Sunday, and I walked off the stage, when the gathering was over, and a gentleman in our church who I actually had never met before, he just walks up to me and said, hey, I'm not even sure if he knew I was in college ministry. It's kind of one of those things where like, I have no idea. He might have, but he just said, when you were singing, this was his phrase, he said, I felt the light of the Lord kind of shine on your face. And I heard from him that you were going to help other college campuses grow in ministry, grow in revival, and spread across the state and region. And of course, that's a cool thing to hear, but I had no threads to run it in at that point. I was just like, great, I'm busy, it'd be nice in maybe a couple decades. I'm very settled here at Highland, had zero interest in changing my job, and love college ministry, love Highland, love Waco. And so just kind of filed it away. Well, it only took 3 days to then get this phone call from you. That was essentially this very opportunity, the lane, the sort of, ruts to get in in that word from the Lord. And so, of course, that didn't mean it was 100% going to happen, but that definitely gave me a head start on, okay, maybe God is in this and I need to give some space to this, to pray, to think about it. So we had to go through those hoops, talking to obviously my wife and the church and really spend some time in prayer with the Lord. But that same day you called me, I was in this parking lot, about to walk into our very first college night of the whole year, so it's the big kickoff, so many guests, the biggest, attendance we'll have the whole year. And I'm going to preach a sermon out of 1 Samuel where Saul is being approached by Samuel. And, Saul is just at the end of his life, the whole king thing has gone really bad. He's like an arrogant, horrible leader at this point. And it didn't start that way. It started good. It ended bad. And Samuel's approaching him at the end of his life. And he says to him, Saul, when you were little in your own eyes, you had God's anointing on you and you had God's leadership established in your life. And that phrase, little in your own eyes. So the whole sermon was just about spiritual narcissism and like staying small in your own eyes. God will do big things through you if you stay small through your own eyes. And so like, I'm literally in the parking lot, like hanging up the phone with you, hearing about this opportunity to go in and preach that sermon. Right. And so God just really marked me in that season of just, this is a big opportunity, but you need to remain little in your own eyes. That's where the anointing is. That's where God blesses and establishes leaders, and that's what's been happening over the last, 10, 15 years of my life, is just really saying, hey, I'm not looking for the next thing. It's just as the Lord wants to, bring it into our view, we will pray about that. And so my favorite part about this is that I get to remain doing ministry here and I get to remain doing college ministry. It's just that my college ministry fences have gotten way wider. Instead of like this property or this city or this campus, I get to be a part of helping serve, connect, support, equip, whatever it is, many other campuses, many other ministers. And it's still college ministry. It's still Highland. It's still in the game as it is, right? And so I think that 2.0 part is really important, that I'm still doing it and I've been doing it. And that's unique, but I do sense God's permission. There were so many hoops from that phone call to this to this podcast. And God honestly easily jumped through all of them. It's just confirmation, right? Really that, and even that word from that gentleman 3 days prior, it's just, the Lord has been so clear. And so if he's calling me to it and calling us to it, then I'm confident he's going to, kind of figure out how to do it. Know? And so I'm very excited about that because he's been so obvious and so clear with us.
Yeah, he certainly has. And for those of you that are kind of catching up on like what is the Roundup Network, it's collegiate, I hear all these different names kind of thrown around. So essentially, this Roundup Network is within the Southern Baptists of Texas Convention. It is the college arm. And what we've done is we've created a community of leaders, and then we resource those community of leaders and with events, gatherings, resources. And so what Drew's kind of stepping into is he's stepping into leading that network of leaders, which, we probably have touch points with several hundred churches a year, several hundred leaders a year. And so Drew will oversee that, and I will take a step out of that. Part of like what my job now is I'll be in more of an administrative capacity where I'm helping is we have the Roundup Network. Our organization is going to create several other networks that I'll help oversee and provide help structure to Roundup being one of them. So I'll still kind of have a little involvement, but Drew's going to be really creating vision, implementing vision, and I'll help make sure he's got the support and the money to do it. But I just want to provide some clarity on that. And so, Drew, tell me about, like, you thinking about this, you stepping into this role.
Yes.
What excites you the most about doing this?
I think just being helpful, being a servant to churches. One thing I love about Baptists is that it's a bottom-up, ministry model. No one's forced to take my call. No one's forced to come to Roundup. No one's going to get a demerit if they don't come. It's just the people that are trying to learn and grow, and maybe they're struggling or maybe they're succeeding, and it's just like, I want a little help, And so I think my favorite thing that I get to do in college ministry here locally as a college pastor, but then now across the region as a college mobilizer, is to really prepare people for movement. That's what the word mobilizer means. It means to prepare people for movement. And so it's not my job as an authority, but it's my job actually as a servant. To just say, hey, if you need help, it may not be for me. It might be me connecting you to somebody who knows what they're talking about. I might just be the middleman. I might just be the reason why you came to this conference because we connected and now you got connected to all these other things. But just being a servant in the kingdom to help, because every campus is so different from the other one. And every church is so different from those same churches around that different campus even. And so it's not about the expertise that I've learned about here, at all. It's just the thing that God has helped me to see is just when we can just, again, be little and go low and just be a servant and try to be helpful and equip and help people take their next steps. Growing up, my pastor always used to say, everybody in this room has a next step, And so it doesn't matter if you're a brand new college pastor or if you are a college student listening to this, or if you are, the oldest, most seasoned veteran college pastor, successful college pastor ever. There's a next step to take. And so I think what I'm excited about Roundup is like, how do we identify those thousands of different next steps, and help each other through this network, through prayer, And through the resources of, we have so many big brothers in the faith, and big sisters in the faith, spiritual mothers and just people that have taught us things that of course we can just share directly, but also it's like, hey, I want to introduce you to this person that really helped me, and that's something that I think will be expanded. I have a small version of that here in Waco, and I know that the longer I can be a part of this, Roundup Network, I can expand that connection to be a conduit for everybody within it. And so that's what I'm excited about, just to serve and help and whatever people need.
Well, man, I'm excited about that too, Drew. I think that's going to go really well. You're widely respected, not just here in Waco, around the state. I think what you guys have done here in Waco, in the kingdom collaboration that you guys have shown here, is just a big reason why I think this is going to be a great, a really great fit for you, man. And just really excited about it.
Me too. And I think I hope that, when we're thinking about, okay, what does this 2.0 look like? And we're going to learn. I think for me, the next 8 months is just learning and listening. I've been sending text messages and emails out to different people in the network, just saying, hey, I'd love to connect. I'd love to get on a call with you and just listen and learn. And I expect, though, again, like we talked about with this transition of ministry emphasis with this generation, is that what God wants us to do is simplify, and really not overcomplicate or over programmatic things, but just really focus on, word, prayer, witness, outreach, and local church belonging, the 20-year-old realizing, well, this really matters if I'm a member of a church or not. This is going to, and so just really trying to help that testimony be shared, not just from Waco out, or not just from, the Metroplex out, but from the valley up, and from the west, east, and from the north, south, and all of the central and areas. Right. And so just being able to say, hey, let's learn from each other on how to simplify and really refocus on what matters and what's working. And that's actually not that hard. It's just, we need that encouragement, that testimony to go, oh yeah, I can do that. We can do that. And God will move when we just yield ourselves in prayer. We go little, we go simple, we go word, we go prayer, we go, witness. And that's what God blesses. And I think our state can really reach so many more people, so many more students, and transform their lives through the gospel, but through the simple gospel. And I think that's what we need as college students, college pastors, to really recognize and embrace for this 2.0.
That's good, man. That's good. Well, what would you say to, if there's a church out there, if there's a college, because I think this is what I love about, what I really like about you guys so much, is that you had a college pastor before you that was here for 16 years, 17 years? You've been here now. Like, that's nobody, you don't see that anywhere.
Right.
And man, it would be such a blessing if we got to look down the road and there was churches that made reaching college students a priority. And I know, I get it, not every church is around a Baylor kind of thing, but made that a priority of investing as heavily as you guys are. But I just want to say, what would you say to the church out there, to the college minister out there, about them leaning in this next season of Roundup Network? What kind of encouragement would you give?
Well, I think so many times the vision for a local church outside the college ministry, of course it includes them, but just the wider vision for a local church is excellent. It's not like they're not, setting aside college ministry because of some sort of poor vision. But oftentimes I think what happens in local churches is that the lead pastor, the elders, the deacon board, whoever's leading the church, doesn't recognize that to accomplish this wider vision, we want to reach families, we want to reach the community. We want to grow our prayer emphasis. We want to grow our sendability. It's like, well, the most available people to be children's ministry leaders and to be up at 8 a.m. at a prayer meeting, to be sendable to the nations, to do all these things are the 18 to 25-year-olds. And so to do that great vision that God's given you, I think requires an investment into that sendable, moldable, available group. And that's the college students. That's the young adults. And so whether you're a senior pastor thinking about maybe we need to grow in our college ministry, aim, or maybe you're the youth minister that they tasked you with the Sunday morning Sunday school just for the college. That's what college ministry is, or of course the college minister in between full-time, full team, whatever it is, everything in between that. Roundup is so helpful because it just allows you to, again, learn from some people. Some of them will be on platforms. Some of them might be leading breakouts. Yes. But really learn from peers, the moments in between those meetings, the connections, I follow them on Instagram and I saw they're doing this. That's encouraging. I want to give them a call and learn about that. we don't realize how helpful it is just to network together, to pray together, to learn together. Yeah. And again, that goes for the senior pastor who's just trying to figure out how to make that happen in their church with somebody else's leadership, or the growth point of a volunteer, or of a youth pastor that's been tasked with it on the side. And so I'd really encourage people to just jump into Roundup, because it allows you to just bump shoulders with so many people who are doing it so many different ways. There's not one way to do it. Yeah. But there is, I think, a really healthy place that you have helped to build in this Roundup 1.0 kind of network that's established. It's ready. I could not have said yes to this, if you didn't have already had this great network with these conferences twice a year, and the churches that are involved, everything from the emails to the podcast, the resource ability, all of that is such a strong infrastructure and of the Lord that comes from your gifting as a builder, as a connector, that then allows this 2.0 version to just take off on. I don't have the capacity or time to build that, but now it's there. And the best part is that's how I got in. I mean, I jumped in just a few years ago into something that was already working, already healthy. And I was doing it here in a big way, but I still learned so much from these people who had much smaller ministries than I did. It wasn't about the size of the ministry. It was like, wow, that is genius. Like, God is doing something in your ministry there. I need to learn from that. I need to cut this. I need to add that. I need to multiply this. Wouldn't have happened if I didn't just show up to a Roundup, if I didn't start, poking around on the resources that you have provided us. And so I would just encourage anybody to start poking around, start signing up, and see what God does.
Man, that's good, Drew. Well, what would you say to folks that have kind of already been kind of hanging around in this environment, as kind of leaning in here in the future? I don't know, what could you just give us like a little, I know you're just getting started, but maybe some vision casting on why they need to keep leaning in, increase involvement, into what we're doing.
Yeah. I sense that more and more churches are getting it about college ministry. The college minister listening to this probably has been getting it for 10 months, 10 years, whatever it is. But I'm hopeful that, we're seeing more and more churches, and I'm hopeful because I'm experiencing it, that, the church that used to have a part-time college pastor is now a full-time college pastor, or didn't pay they had no budget towards the college ministry, now has one, and they're seeing it like youth ministry, they're seeing it like adult ministry, anything like that. And so I think that is critical. It's also, we are in an extremely, we're blessed through the things like the North American Mission Board, through, of course, our state denomination, as well as the International Mission Board, to be a part of this group that has very sendable systems, And so I think we should lean in, because I don't think we've ever had easier ways to take a 21, 22-year-old accountant who's just planning to go to Dallas to be an accountant. To get that accountant to go to Toronto instead, to be an accountant there, or to Boston, or to Salt Lake City, or to Europe, whatever it is. And that is, we have it easier than most other ministries because of these networks that we're a part of. And so I think we're really doing a disservice to the kingdom of God if we don't lean into that and leverage that, emphasize that. And so, again, whether that's your lead pastor, having a big initiative for those things, sending college students, or it's your college ministry that just says, hey, we're going to start trying to have a slow trickle, that grows. The system, the infrastructure is working really well. And we need to now, as college ministries and as a state, where there are probably the most Christian college students are in this state, in America, is my guess. We have a responsibility, and I would say we have a stewardship to say, well, if we neglect this, then the place where the most sendable Christians are in college is just neglecting the most important responsibility, the Great Commission, to go out and to do this thing. And so we've got to lean in. And if we've been leaning in a little bit, let's lean in again. I'm leaning in more. We're putting that in front of our students this next week in a fresh and new way, because I sense that moment is important to send, and students want to go. And so let's do that together. Let's lean in together.
Drew, you got me fired up, man. I feel like I'm about to be the pastor that preaches the sermon after the guy preaches. But you're right. I mean, I feel like we're doubling down on our relationship with IMB, with North American Mission Board, through Jensen. There's a ton of opportunity. There's a ton of infrastructure that's there. It's like just binding together to do it. To whether it's whatever level you get on, whether it's coming to a networking lunch, showing up to Roundup, rubbing shoulders, learning with other people, or it's mobilizing your students through summer projects or overseas. There's tons of opportunity coming, and I'm really excited, and I think you're the guy for the role. And Drew, just super pumped, man, and I appreciate you taking the time for us to just kind of lay out and explain just the story of Roundup Network, my role in it, your role in it, and I just want to encourage everybody. Like, this is going to be. I really think this is going to be a great future. I really think that God's going to really do tremendous things through this as we're raising up the next generation of disciple makers.
Me too.
Here in Texas, but not just in Texas, but across the world. And Drew, I'm excited you're going to be leading it.
I'm thankful, humbled, excited, prayerful, and just ready. It's going to be a great 2025 and 2.0.
It'll be good.
Yeah.